of thoughts because a book crossed my desk called Romancing the Shadow. And at first I thought, wow, this means romancing, sounds like romancing the stone. Illuminating the dark side of the soul, and that's something that we're all interested in. Our guest is Dr. Connie Zweig, and I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Pat.
Romancing the shadow is something that you know a lot about because as a psychotherapist, you're working in this very area, aren't you?
That's right. All of psychotherapy in some ways works with our dark side, but we have really developed a special approach, which we call shadow work, to working with the shadow. So let me explain to you first what we mean by the term shadow. It's that part of us that contains our more difficult impulses, are the feelings
Our dark side?
Our dark side, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Each of us has a dark side. Even though we're very good people and we mean well, every once in a while there's a part of us that just impulsively jumps out and does something that may be self-destructive or maybe a little hurtful to someone else.
Is that kind of natural, though?
It is natural. It is natural, but you probably notice when this happens to you that you feel guilty and ashamed afterwards, maybe even unacceptable to yourself. And so we've developed a way to turn the shadows into light. We've developed a way for folks who are having this common everyday experience each day to have a different result.
So everybody has a shadow.
Everybody does.
Even though they think they're such a good fellow, they have this
That's
little
right.
darker,
That's
shadowy
right.
side,
That's right.
which many things are hidden.
Many things are hidden there. The shadow knows.
Do we know? Do we know?
No, we don't know, because it's the nature of the shadow to hide. It remains behind the boundaries of our awareness, and then it jumps out in these difficult behaviors. So, for example, a woman may lose her temper and yell at her child and feel terrible about it afterwards. In fact, she may have even promised herself that she would never behave the way her mother did to her, that she would never yell at her child because her mother did that to her. And yet she finds herself at moments out of control and yelling at. That's the shadow acting out.
It's not just human nature?
It's partly human nature.
Anybody can get pushed. How do you know when it's the shadow, and how do you know when it's just everyday living?
Well, you know when it's the shadow acting out spontaneously out of your control when you feel badly afterwards. You feel guilty, you feel regret. So, for example, if you're having a repetitive fight with your husband and you begin to know what it is that you say that's going to make him hurt and angry, and yet you can't stop yourself from saying it, that's the shadow. And in those moments, it takes control. It moves into the driver's seat. And it's as if you can't stop yourself, even though you'd like to. So the book is about how to change those behaviors and get some help.
This can happen at work. This can happen in a relationship. This little suppressed part of us can pop out.
That's right. That's
when
right.
we least expect or want it.
That's right, in all kinds of ways.
You call it shadow work. I thought that was kind of interesting. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's this kind of play on working with the shadow. Let me give you an example of shadow work that I experienced recently. I have a client who is single. She's about 30. And she has a boyfriend, a man she's dating, but she's home alone a lot at night. And she gets lonely. She kind of gets bored when she's reading or watching television. And she has a voice that comes up inside her mind and says to her, if only you eat some ice cream, you'll feel better. You'll fill yourself up and you won't feel so empty inside. So for many months now, she's waiting for her boyfriend to call. He doesn't call as often as she'd like.
So she's eating ice cream.
She goes down to the freezer, and instead of having a taste, she may eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia. Afterwards, she feels so guilty. She feels ashamed that she lost control. That's how we know the shadow was there. So she's now been doing shadow work.
Ah.
Yes.
And how do? You just tell her, don't go to the refrigerator.
No, It's not enough, and I think all of us have experienced that. Just saying no is not enough. So what happens is, now she recognizes that voice, which repeats itself inside her mind. If only you eat ice cream, you'll feel better. You'll fill yourself up. And along with the voice, there's an emotion that comes up. I feel empty and sad inside. And there's a physical sensation, she says, that goes with it. My stomach feels empty, like it needs to be filled up. Now she has 3 dimensions of this shadow character, and she's given it a name, the foodie.
Oh.
Now she can identify quickly when the foodie is around, and in a fraction of a second she has a choice. She can obey the voice of the foodie as she has in the past and then have the same result, or she can hit the pause button, slow herself down, and decide to do something differently.
We're really talking about an awareness here, aren't we?
We're talking about
something that we would normally just do without thought.
Yes.
We become aware of.
Yes. And with awareness, we can behave differently and have a different result. That's
We're
right.
not talking just about food either. We're talking about alcohol. We're talking about smoking. We're talking about any of the addiction
Any of the
areas.
addictive behaviors, but many other behaviors as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in LA, the freeways are just a disaster. And I have a client who came in saying to me, the other day he was cut off when he was going about 70 miles an hour. But instead of hitting the brakes, he hit the accelerator. Can you imagine? He actually endangered his own life because at that moment a rage overtook him and he wanted to get revenge on that driver who cut him off. And he came into me and he said, I wasn't myself when I did that. I don't know what came over me. That's a cue that the shadow was around. That was the shadow taking over.
Is this just semantics in a sense? I mean, we've always known, and it's always through literature and history, and as you even mentioned in the book, back into mythology, there's always been that dark
That's right.
side of our nature, that hidden part of us. So is this, the use of the word shadow here, is this kind of a new thought, a new way of expressing an old theme, an old idea?
It's new and it's not new. Let me explain. You're right, it's been around as long as humanity. If you look at the Bible, stories of Jesus and Judas, or Cain and Abel, or Satan and God, are really religious terminology for what we're talking about in psychology. And the same is true in myths and legends in other cultures. The hero has to descend to the underworld and kill the beast. If you look at that psychologically, he is killing his own shadow. What we're suggesting is not that we kill it. And you know, a lot of pop psychologists I've been hearing on the radio lately say just that. They say, kill it off with positive thinking, pretend you don't have it and it will go away. We know that doesn't work. So what we're suggesting is something else, and we call it romancing the shadow.
Okay. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to find out more about romancing the shadow. I think it's pretty clever. We all know we've got that little dark side. Want to get rid of it? She might even give us a few tips here. Stick with us as Lifestyle continues.